This talk is about building new monuments. It's about building new monuments using design and using layers. And I'll challenge you all to translate it to your own field of work. Much of our environment is still very much influenced and shaped by ideas of the industrial age. And I wondered, how can we translate that to the contemporary and future society? Well, first, back to the industrial age. We invented steam engines and assembly lines, and that made the mass production of goods possible. So, products became cheap and affordable, and therefore mass production led to mass consumption of goods. And this had huge impact on our society, and lots of farm workers went to the cities, and there was a big demand of affordable housing in the cities. So also architecture became a product of mass consumption and mass production. So designing in the industrial age, it was all about the product, and it was about making the price of the product as low as possible. And we did it with static functionality to keep the product simple and cheap. And later on, we developed integrated products. And these are products where the mechanics and the materials are merged with electronics. They're difficult products. But the static functionality of products causes a lack of adaptation. So if you have different needs in life, you have to buy new ones. And the problem with integration in products is that the part with the shortest life cycle defines the moment you have to throw it away. And then you have to buy new ones because that's easier. So owning products can give you a headache because you have failure, you have maintenance, a lack of adaptability. And we moved from the industrial age to the new millennial economy. And there's a trend that people say, the millennials, that are people that are born between the 80s and 2000, and they don't care about ownership anymore, as much as we did. They want just access to functionality. And this functionality must be easy to obtain and should be about choice and adaptability. And they look at the total cost of the use and not just the price of purchase. And the move from iTunes to Spotify illustrates it, because as iTunes is this owning digital music, with Spotify you have a subscription and that just gives you access to music, and as your music taste develops, you listen to different songs. And everybody with old CDs in boxes in his cellar that he never listens to knows that it's a smart solution. So if we look at products for the millennial age, they should be about the people's life cycle and the changing demands in your life cycle, and the total cost of use, and adaptation of functionality. And therefore, we use layer design. And I'll explain that. Because layer design gives you the possibility to clarify between the people's life cycle and the product's life cycle. People's life cycle, that's layer 1, and the product's life cycle, layer 2 and 3. And layering also gives you the possibility to adjust the different parts of your product to the flexibility you want and the life cycle you need. So how does it work? I have two examples, one in car industry and one in architecture. I'll start with the concept car we developed for a design competition. And we looked at the industrial age design of cars. The cost of use of a car are not very well estimated. If you have a new car, you can estimate them, but as the car gets older, it's like you're in a lottery and you only have bad surprises. And because it's an integrated product, lots of cars are going to the junkyard because just they have a partial failure of the engine or the rusted chassis. And in Holland, that's a 17 years average. So that's a waste of material. Besides that, cars are not adaptable. If you get kids, you need to buy a new car, and we do. And they have a very bad personal interface. If you've ever used a navigation system in cheap cars, you know that the menus are bad and it's slow. Well, imagine that in 17 years. It would be like still using MS-DOS commands to use your computer. So if you look at millennial age design approach of a car, you say there are 3 layers. The first is the interface of the user. And we thought that can better be your smartphone. And this was 2 years ago, this competition, and now we have the Tesla. So that's nice to see. And that's much better equipped to adjust to your lifestyle and have new maps on it and new apps on it. And the second layer is also about the user and the owner who changes his life. And we thought this body of a car, that should be changeable. It should be low-tech. And if you have kids, you just have another one. And the third layer, the chassis, that's all the technique in it. So you want that to get you from A to B, to be reliable, to be economical, and safe. So we thought that should be electrical, and you just lease it for 40 years from the car company. And this car company would really be motivated to put the best equipment in it for the whole life cycle, and not just good enough to justify the purchase of the car now. So this is the prototype. We built a working prototype, and this is the idea of the concept car with the sport top. And well, the idea proved much to be too conceptual for the competition, but it's very much fun building and driving it. And it also illustrates how you can approach car industry on a different way using these layers. But car industry is very slow, and prototyping is very expensive. Luckily, I'm in the building industry, and there we make prototypes every day. And also there you can adjust layers to the design process. So if you look at architecture, and you have the industrial age design approach, it's all about building costs, the purchase of the building. And there's a problem if you want to use sustainable techniques, because they make the building costs higher, and they will be paid back. But if your business case is about the building cost, lots of these techniques don't make it through the design phase. And buildings are very bad adaptable, because it's an integrated product. We put the piping and electrics into the concrete, and if you want to change the layout or the functionality, it's often easier to just build a new one than to repair or redevelop the old building. And this big scale housing projects led to impersonal buildings that people don't love. And for one of those reasons, modernist buildings of the industrial age, the form follows function buildings, are written off in 40 years and then put down. Luckily in Holland, we also have old buildings, the monuments we know in the historic city centers. And as an average in Holland, 57% of our buildings are getting older than 100 years. And I thought, why don't we design new monuments? And that's when I started research after how to do so. And I looked at the work of Frank Beidendijk. He is former director of Housing Corporation Stadgenoot in Amsterdam. And he also said there are 3 layers that we can use in architecture. The first layer, again, is of the people's life cycles, is the interior. And you should want to design it and build it yourself, and it should follow your life's developments. So if you have kids, you want an extra room, and maybe a few years later you want to change your house into a music studio. And you should be able to do that. And as an average, this layer has a life cycle of like 10 years. The second layer is the structure of a building. And that can easily last up to 100 years, or like in the city center of Amsterdam, 400 years. And the housing corporation should own that, because they can maintain it for such a long time. And then you have the third layer, and that's the city and the public space. That lasts up to 1,000 years, like our old historic cities in Holland. And therefore the government should be responsible for it. They built 2 prototypes recently in Amsterdam. And they were really innovative, because they had a spatial planning permit that allowed every function possible in these 2 buildings, except coffee shops and brothels. So every change can easily be made. The structure is completely separated from the interior. And the language of architecture of the building makes them able to last more than 100 years. And in a theoretical business case, Beidendijk calculated, and he compared this solid idea with a normal building. And if you look over 107 years, you have 24% more profit, because the investment is a less big part of the whole life cycle. So property still can be a good investment. And as I researched this idea, I got more and more convinced that we in building industry should change. Because this high demand and the big scale solutions got us in the trouble that building industry is right now. And we have people now going to the city again. These are elderly people who want to be close to facilities and healthcare. And they don't want a quantitative approach, but a qualitative approach of changing monuments that can adjust to the lifestyles of the different citizen generations. So we should not copy these buildings, but be inspired with the change they bring. So to finish off, I think it's time to move from industrial age design to millennial age design and look at people's life cycles and the total cost of use. And that we should make buildings adaptable to this functionality and the changes in your lifestyle. And that we can do by using layers. And then we really move from form follows function to form follows culture. Thank you.